App Engine. Let's talk about one of Google's longest running cloud services, and perhaps one of the more powerful ones, especially if you're a developer. Now, when it comes to a platform as a service, there's no question App Engine is clearly the leader, if not one of the leaders in this area. It is a fully managed, essentially, platform as a service. You would essentially deploy your runtime environment, your code on top of that environment, basically. And I'll talk about the different environments, standard and flexible, here shortly. This is all hosted on Google's infrastructure and networks. And it supports source code that is typically going to be in Python, Java, Node.js, Go, Ruby, PHP, or .NET. And the link for App Engine is right there. But let's talk more about App Engine, some of the features and capabilities. So we know that App Engine is a platform as a service. We want to use it to deploy applications on a fully managed, essentially serverless platform. This is a platform where you build and deploy your applications. You can scale them basically from 0 to 100. It's going to allow your developers to basically go from 0 to 100 and not have to worry about the infrastructure deploying virtual machines and storage, for example. It supports all the languages that you would expect. Basically, a couple things to point out is that App Engine is a regional service. This means when you deploy this in a region, it is that region. It's not going to be moved. If you need to serve customers in Europe or in the US or Asia, you need to be aware of where you're deploying App Engine and what would provide essentially the best capabilities around performance, essentially, for your user base. Once again, it is a managed service. It is redundant in those zones in the region. But once you deploy it, for example, in Iowa, it's that instance is in Iowa. It's not going anywhere. If you have users that are having challenges in Asia, then what you would have to do is deploy an instance of App Engine there. So once you basically deploy it, that region's set, it is what it is. There's free and paid resources available. It supports Spring Framework, supports Memcache. It also has an SLA. And again, there's certainly a lot more to it. The goal of this module is not to talk about App Engine for 5 hours, just to give you a quick review of some of the things you might want to pay attention to. But I did want to mention on this exam, well, actually not just this exam, whether you take the architect, the engineer, or the developer or data engineer exams, it seemed like App Engine is pretty heavily tested. You need to know that it supports traffic splitting, application versioning. It also, integrates with Stackdriver. A lot more to that. But in general, just realize that App Engine is really meant for you to deploy your web applications. Now, there is an App Engine SDK, client libraries, installation process. You want to go to the download section. I do have a demo on that for those curious in the course that'll be coming up. And then let's see here. I won't read everything. But basically, again, you could initialize the SDK. It's gcloud init. We'll go through that in the demo. I'll move on. Now, App Engine, the instances when you deploy them, and you'll see this when we go through the demos, but basically they'll be health checked. They'll they'll be available. If there's an issue, again, you can control or let Google control how things are managed. It's up to you. These instances, when you do deploy them, are restarted on a weekly basis, and this is when GCP will provide updates to the platform. There is root access to the Compute Engine instances, and by default, SSH to the instances in the flexible environment is disabled. One of the challenges with this exam is it does expect you to know, should I use standard or should I use flexible? Now, in reality, this is actually a pretty simple decision to make. But once again, if you're not familiar with App Engine, it may not be that easy. You want to use standard where you have the runtime environment that is supported by App Engine, available in your application code that you could port over and just start working with. So if you're running Go, great. If you're running .NET or Python, that's wonderful. For example, App Engine Standard supports Python 2.7 and 3.7, Java 8, Java 7, PHP 5.5 and 7.2, and it supports Go and Java as well. Go 1.6, I think it supports 4 versions of Go right now. 1.6, 1.8, 1.9, and 1.11 would be the correct versions from my memory. Okay. But with that said, if you have an application that is using, for example, an unsupported version of Go, like 1.10, then if you want to still use that application and not have to migrate it to a supported Go version with App Engine, then you'd simply want to go to flexible environment and deploy that on a container. These are the standard language versions that are supported. This was as of December 15th or 18th, something of that nature. And then with flexible, it supports these runtime environments, but it allows you the flexibility to deploy what version of these that you so choose in a container. Now, App Engine has a cool feature called Cloud Security Scanner. This is going to allow your developers to essentially find known vulnerabilities in their code at a time, like CSS script issues or ports open, whatever the supported requirements are. There's a demo on this. We'll go through a course and show you how it works. When it comes to storing data, you can, of course, select how you want to store your data. You have a lot of choices. You could use Cloud Data Store for schemaless data, such as NoSQL, Cloud Storage for basically object data, Cloud SQL for relational data, but you could also connect third-party services as well that you may be using. A lot of customers I see use Hadoop, MongoDB. Redis is actually pretty popular as well. Now, when it comes to scaling, let's go ahead and discuss this. With App Engine uses an app.yaml file, and this specifies the instance class. Now, you don't need to know this for the Cloud Architect exam, but if you're taking the developer exam or the data engineer exam or the cloud engineer exam, you need to know what this does and how it works. But I'm going to go ahead and skip over most of this. It's just there for you to refresh your memories. The scaling type controls how instances are created. Now, the instance class determines the resources. For example, you would specify how much memory, how much CPU speed you want to pay for. It tells you the pricing, as you would expect. There's 3 types to scaling. There's manual, basic, and automatic. Once again, the scaling is going to be dependent on the instance class. When you're deploying these resources, you need to pay attention to this ahead of time. All right. On this exam, actually on any Google exam, it seems like they love to talk about testing around A/B testing or blue-green testing. With that said, you want to know what it is, how it works, traffic splitting, why you want to use traffic splitting. Let's say, for example, you have some developers that need to conduct testing. You have version 1.A or 1A.1 or 1A.B, whatever you want to call it. Let's just make it simple, version 1 and version 2. Version 1's been running great until someone made some changes last week and it's not running so well. What do you want to do? You want to go ahead and take that new version and split traffic to it to see before you fail everyone over, for example, make sure that it works. So you want to target, basically URLs to make sure that this is, working the way you think it is. It allows the developers to roll out changes when required. One of the things to pay attention, I did put down here just as a note, that required privileges and check caching issues can be a concern, so you need to pay attention to some of this ahead of time. When you're splitting traffic, it's usually done by 3 different approaches. By IP address, by a cookie, or random. For example, an IP address is exactly what it sounds like. Put in the IP address range that you want. It'll split traffic by that. A cookie is what? That's going to be that little snippet of code that people might have for that application on their desktops, for example, or mobile devices. And based on that cookie version, it can route that traffic however. And then random is just going to logically allocate traffic based on behavior patterns, typically. When we go through the demo, we'll go through this. And then A/B testing. This is where you could specify, I want traffic to go here, and I want traffic to go there based on maybe the type of traffic or the workload, whatever that's, or geography, for example, whatever that is.